we are live. So, well, I will kick us off. So, good day, everyone, and good evening, everyone who's joining us live. Welcome to a little live broadcast, live stream webinar. We're looking today at the ACVA assessment, the OCVA assessment, and a little bit around the colour perception standards and where the direction we're now seeing from CASA about where things fit in. Really happy to have with us today Simon. So Simon is, as far as we know, the first person in Australia to have sat and successfully completed the ACVA assessment, as well as having sat the OCVA, the Operational Colour Vision Assessment, as well. And Simon's got a really, I was going to say good, but probably not so great Simon, but Simon's got a heck of a story to tell about the last almost 2 years and everything he's gone through in that. But just before we kick off, and I'll get Simon to introduce himself, I just want to play a very short clip from Senate estimates, about 60 seconds, 90 seconds worth of clip, just talking about CASA's response to that very question around what happens if someone has completed the OCVA, will they have to do the ACVA? It's a really telling response, and then we'll get Simon up to talk about his experience.
Question then is, my understanding is that in accordance with the regulation, which I could look it up, I've got it written here somewhere, but I'm sure you know what it is. In accordance with the regulation, CASA was still advising pilots to do the operational test, which they did at some cost, and then AvMed were denying them an aircrew medical because CASA had changed its mind, even though the regulation still said it was possible, and even though pilots have been directed to that. And so some pilots now, in excess of 12 months, have forked out thousands of dollars to take a flight test and have had their application refused. What is the situation for people who have previously done it before this change in approach? What is the situation for those who did it in this intervening period where the regulation said they would be approved, they committed to a flight test on that basis, and have now been told they're not able to fly? What is CASA going to do to enable those people to move ahead with their life, and can you guarantee there's going to be no retrospective action against the many pilots who did the original 2020 announced operational flight test, have been flying single pilot in RFDS type operations, multi-pilot in RPT operations, both domestically and overseas, without incident since they got their medicals? Can you guarantee that they will be able to continue to exercise the qualifications that they have earned in accordance with the regulation, or will there be any retrospective action that CASA is looking to impose upon them?
Can I just sort of jump in first? If you've got people who've come to you saying that they haven't been approved, then I would really encourage you to refer them either to myself, to Mr Marcellia or Dr Manderson, because that doesn't sound like that's consistent with our policy. I would have thought with medicals, there are things that come up every 2 years or whatever, depending on where you are, and so there would be no retrospective requirements. But if matters change over time, then to get your medical renewed. But there's certainly not an intention to have a retrospective element to all of this. But again, encourage anyone who's spoken to you who said that they've been refused on the grounds that you've described, please encourage them to talk to us, because that just doesn't sound right.
So that just doesn't sound right. Really nice little words to end on there. But Simon, does any of that speak true to you over your experience in the last almost 2 years now?
No. So my experience with them was so CASA gave me the opportunity to either do on the 2nd of December 2021, I was given the opportunity by an AvMed officer to sit either the OCVA or the CAD test as the test, because that's what was stipulated by them at the time. Now, Christmas close downs, what have you. I sat that OCVA on the 4th of January 2022, both day and night conditions, nil deficiencies found, no issues whatsoever. Passed it, submitted the completed documents back to CASA the very next day, and they said, thank you very much. We look forward to solving this problem for you, and you'll hear from us. So fast forward 2 months into March, when I was due to commence my training course and my flying, still hadn't heard anything, which at the time was, we shall get this through to you, but with COVID, we're taking a little bit longer, as the entire world was. So I took it on face value and started to get a little bit antsy when I heard they were reviewing the OCVA. No AvMed officer had told me this, and then it wasn't until I started to rattle the birdcage, hit up a few people in CASA and said, this is not going anywhere, what's the go? And it got handled to the deputy principal medical officer, who said, well, no, we're going to issue you your medical, well, while you were told you we're going to give you an unrestricted medical, that's actually untrue. You're now going to incur both night restrictions, where you can't fly at night, you can't fly or hold an ATPL, and you can't fly under instrumentation rules, contrary to what I was told by AvMed. So that was in April. And after I sought legal advice, threw it back in their face to say, well, you're still telling people to do this. And I know of 3 people who have phoned up and said, I want to sit the OCVA. And they've said, oh, we're not sure what's happening with that, just stand by. And it wasn't until those screenshots of their own website were sent through from a legal solicitor to CASA that they changed their website to say, this is now under review, we're not going to let you do it. So that was start of first quarter of 2022. So year goes by, nothing, no news, weekly follow-ups, no news, emails to the deputy PMO, nothing until July this year, where I caught wind through CVDPA that the ACVA was coming as a replacement of that. I've gone, oh, goody, great, they've finally done something. So I emailed the deputy PMO and said, hey, where are you at with this? And he's gone, good news, this is coming. It'll be here September. We'll have it ready for you September. Fast forward September. No, we've been pushed back a bit. There'll be another 3 weeks. So this is now start of October. I rung again. I said, where is this at? You've now got a deadline. I'll give you a deadline to November 22nd before I take more legal advice against you. You've effectively held my potential career back near on 2 years. Where is this at? Then he come through in writing to say that the ACVA has been held up because of political reasons, blamed the CVDPA, and that's why it's held up, as well as saying that there was a payment gateway issue, that people couldn't pay for the ACVA, and I found that really hard to believe when no one could actually sit it at the time. So there was a string of excuses given. So I, again, didn't take anything on face value and reached out to CVDPA to get some guidance on where it was at. And John O'Brien was the first one who contacted me, and he asked me to submit all of my information I had, all of my correspondence over that 2-year period through to him, which he then subsequently passed on to Senator David Fawcett. And it wasn't until it hit that federal level at the end of October, start of November, that the things happened really rapidly. So the deputy PMO offered me to sit the ACVA at the end of November. I'll be the first candidate. I'll be a guinea pig. It'll be great. Thanks for coming. And then, no worries, 2 hours later rings you back and goes, I just want to let you know we're still going to put a restriction on your medical. And I've said, well, that's contrary to what you've publicised on the website, contrary to what you have told me throughout this entire ordeal, and contrary to what the actual OCVA was. So throughout the entire month of November, I fought with the help of CVDPA and Senator Fawcett to clear up what was actually going on with that. So November 24 rolls around, and I actually sat that ACVA. I sat it at Wellcamp Airport, where they conducted the training for it. And I did that with one of CASA's chief flight examiners. So it was as impartial for them as it could possibly be. It was in the most controlled environment for them as it could possibly be. And it was in the most difficult conditions for me as it could possibly be. And as a result, I did pass it. I did not have any issues. And I'm not saying this out of context, or I'm not saying it out of face value, but I've never had an issue identifying PAPI lights. However, I did have many concerns with the ACVA assessment, which we'll probably go into a discussion with shortly, and the glaring emissions surrounding what was assessed in the OCVA versus what wasn't assessed in the ACVA. Now, for those who haven't seen the FOI documents, and Clinton, forgive me if this was your thunder that I'm stealing, but the ACVA consisted of 5 runs. So it wasn't until John O'Brien passed these through to me that they were actually clear as to what the expectation was. So the OCVA, for those who haven't sat it, I was assessed with all aerodrome lighting or runway lighting in multiple airports, not just where I did it. So we flew out to another aerodrome and airport, and looked at direction of aircraft travel, both day and night conditions. We looked at their runway lighting, looked at their PAPI lighting, and we would have done, I spoke to Michael about this as well, we would have done close to, I would say, 15 go-arounds on PAPI lighting and runway lighting. We had to identify aerodrome beacons from 20 nautical miles out. And to me, I've sat there and I've gone, this is doing the assessment. I felt comfortable and I've gone, this is a really comprehensive assessment. Now, fast forward to the ACVA, it was 5 runs. The first run was a practice and they were straight and level flight, forcing you to identify the PAPI lights at a starting point. And then you had to identify the changing behavior of them when they changed, what you saw them change to, and you had to do that in a timely manner. And the whole concept behind this was CVD pilots don't often meet the requirement to identify changes or lights in a timely manner that is safe for air operations. So that change, you didn't know what time you were at when you had to call that out. You had to call it when you saw it. And if that was different to what the assessor saw it, your assessment stopped. So your assessment stopped and you got another attempt at it, but you had to come back another day. So the first run's a practice at 1,500 feet AGL. So you do your practice run 1,500 feet AGL, your next run starts 1,500 feet AGL, and you start at 6 nautical miles from the aerodrome. So the sequence of events is to set up for your approach. You're coming in whichever direction you're landing on, or the runways, the way you're coming in, you identify, can I see the airport? Yes, no. Can I see the runway? Yes, no. Can I see the PAPIs? Yes, no. Okay, you've got the PAPI lights. All right, we're 8 nautical miles from the aerodrome now. Relax. And as we hit the 6 nautical mile marker, or just before, I'll ask you, can you see the PAPI lights? If you answered yes, your next answer had to be what you saw. So if you answered no, I don't know what happened because it didn't occur to me, and I never needed to. But if you said yes, your next answer had to be you're on glide slope, or you're too low, or you're very low. Now, credit where credit is due, and I've said this ever since I've sat it. The CASA flight examiner who facilitated this was fantastic. He was brilliant, and he did settle my nerves quite quickly in the aircraft. It was a stressful test, given that it was thunderstorming and pouring rain when we were scheduled to do it. We moved it 2 hours back. So we ended up wheels up at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was 34 degrees and scattered cloud at 3,100 feet. Now, World Camp Airport, aerodrome runway is 1,500 feet. So at 3,000 feet, those clouds are 100 foot above us. And to the northeast, we had thunderstorms, which were not within any dangerous operation of aircraft range. To the southwest, we had full cloud, and over where we had glare, we had cloud cover, we had full sun. So the conditions were really challenging, and the examiner and I, we acknowledged that, and we both agreed to proceed with the assessment. And look, I'm glad I did, because I got the outcome that I wanted. And the assessment, I thought, was conducted in a very thorough manner. And they're right. They're 100% right with how they've designed it. It doesn't leave any margin for error for an assessor to maybe mistakenly miss something, because if you're starting at an altitude of 1,500 feet and you make one pass, you then proceed to 300 foot lower at 1,200 feet and you make your next pass, and you have to repeat that once more. So they're your 4 laps: 1,500 feet, 1,200 feet, 1,500 feet, 1,200 feet. And at any time, if you make an error, that assessment ceases. So yeah, it does give them total control as to how that assessment is being assessed. However, there are, and I'm not claiming to be a subject matter expert by any means whatsoever, and I'm not claiming to be an experienced pilot. Yes, I do have double-digit hours. However, there are glaring emissions to me, and that do impact safe operation of aircraft. And I've confirmed this with CASA, and some of them agree with me. Some of the very senior people in CASA do agree with me. but that's where it's at. So I sat that, passed that. This week I received my medical without the night restrictions and without the ATPL restrictions, but I still have the restriction number 13 doesn't comply with ICAO Convention Chapter 6, Annex 1. So contrary to what the OCVA was, where you did get a clear, clean medical, this one they have still opposed their, to my, whatever I can review and find under my own research, opinion onto that medical standard, which under advice I sent to CASA and said, what does this mean? What do I tell an employer? How do I not go against that restriction? And they've gone, we'll come back to you. And I'm yet to hear anything now. Benefit of the doubt, I sent that Wednesday. Tuesday afternoon I sent that. Credit where credit's due. The people that I've been dealing with recently have been brilliant. They've been really good, and I do trust them when they say they'll get back to me. However, I think they will struggle to find a legitimate and lawful reason that should be on my medical. With the something I've missed, with the ACVA is the ground theory component to it. Those who have sat the OCVA will know that your ground theory component consisted of a walk around the aerodrome, having a look at the airfield lights in day-night conditions. It also consisted of looking at charts, looking at what you see, what your perception of those colours are on those charts are, not just in day conditions, but my OCVA assessor took me into a blacked out room. I think it might have actually been a spray booth without any lights on. And he gave me an intrinsic torch and said, okay, find me a road. And I eventually found it. And I said to him, you know what, that's quite difficult under a red light to find a red line on a chart. Now, CASA's requirements are that pilots carry an intrinsic torch with them for night flying. So if you're flying under VFR conditions for CPL at night and you are referring to a chart, finding a road, a red line on a chart with a red light is, even for colour normal people, very difficult. Again, I was able to successfully do it once I could determine where I was looking for, what I was looking at. But that was the level of comprehensiveness that my assessor assessed my conditions under. So all of that I've passed on to CASA as well. But fast forward to the ACVA ground theory, and it was what your expectations are, how I'm assessing you. It was for something that they have supposedly designed for pilots with experience who know what they're looking at PAPIs, know what they're seeing, and we're not going to let you do it unless you've met certain criteria, which means you know what you're looking at. Their instructions are still to a level of someone who's never flown a plane before. Now, that may be a good thing that's indicative that they're trying to push this to people who are an aspiring teenager who goes, I want to be a pilot. I've got CVD. I've had medical professionals tell me you'll never be a pilot. I've now got this opportunity, but I've never flown a plane before. Do I really want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars doing this? Or do I just move on with my life? My suggestion to them would be no, don't. You've got a dream for a reason, and there are going to be avenues for you to do that. But if what they were initially talking about was for experienced pilots to do the ACVA, their ground componentry lends itself to somebody who has never flown. Now, my assessor was very good. He recognised that, and he changed the way he provided that material, although he did run through it all word for word, which was what his requirement was. So yeah, I can't thank that CASA examiner enough, because he was brilliant, and he really did settle me. He settled my nerves, settled the anxiety, and he was extremely thorough and extremely professional, but again, didn't have answers for a lot of the questions that I still had regarding the emissions from what was assessed in the OCVA and what isn't assessed in the what was assessed in the OCVA and isn't assessed now.
That's a very comprehensive view, Simon. I think the first thing I want to say is congratulations on getting that medical. I know even with condition 13 on there, but to have it valid for ATPL operations and to have it valid, no other operational restriction on there is, I think, a fantastic outcome. And well deserved.
My Christmas present, let's be honest.
Yeah. And after almost 2 years, that's definitely one heck of a Christmas present. But yeah, still a little way to go with addressing those restrictions. But I think you would be one of the few people, or the only person, to have done both types of testing.
To my understanding, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so your views, thank you for sharing that with everyone. And yeah, I guess talking about the standards and talking about restrictions, Clinton, is there something you want to jump in, or Arthur? I think you've jumped off.
Can I say this? Could I say, having heard Simon, that it's clearer now. I'll make this point. The OCVA was a gold standard test. It complied with every aspect of the ICAO SARPs. It was closely in sync with the FAA occupational operational test that they conduct. We know that because John O'Brien's done the Australian OCVA, the New Zealand OCVA, and now the FAA equivalent. And the ACVA is a dud. It might be a clever test, but you have to realise that you are not going, anyone, if they were given the test to do today, not like Simon, because Simon has a recent history, and to fail Simon or to do something to Simon that, they'd find themselves in court very quick smart because he's passed the OCVA. But a newcomer who hasn't ever had that opportunity is not going to be very happy with what he finishes up with under the present thinking of AvMed. Now, there may be other people in CASA who are trying to change that, but we can't rely on that as yet. The point is, the ACVA is an afterthought after you've failed the CAD test. You must sit the CAD test first, and if you fail the CAD test, you are said to have failed the colour vision standard, full stop. Now, they might throw you a few crumbs after that if you pass the ACVA, but it won't be a full-blown unlimited career in professional aviation. And there are so many flaws in the way they're thinking about this. The most important one is that it still supposes that the PAPI is of paramount importance in the safety of air navigation. And that's just nonsense. People who can't pass the ACVA can nevertheless land very safely at aerodromes with no PAPI at all. So the PAPI is simply an aid, and not tonight, but I will in future, if we keep presenting, I will provide a paper written by people in the US Air Force that says it's nonsense to make PAPI the primary issue in people with CVD. And I see it quite skeptically as an attempt by CASA to protect the dominance and the supremacy of the CAD test. And that's looking after your mates. It's not a good test, the ACVA. And by the way, that stands for the Australian Colour Vision Assessment, as opposed to the Brazilian one or the Kiwi one or the Antarctic one. It's peculiar. It's quite peculiar to Australia because, in the eyes of the people that have brought this about, well, they do everything much better in Australia. They really have a God complex that they live by. The OCVA, on the other hand, was an operational colour vision assessment. Even that wasn't a perfect name for it, but what it meant was it was an operational assessment of people that happened to have the colour vision defect. And throughout, there was no requirement to name colours, but to demonstrate safe performance. And as I've said before, you can only measure that, or that can only be measured by people who are qualified to measure safe performance, and not by some dude sitting on a chair in an AvMed office.
Well, further to what you said, Arthur, you talk about those. Yes, I will freely admit that I do consider myself fortunate that I was able to sit the ACVA, because I could quite still be having this battle with them now and going, you know what, you can wait till the rest of them. And I would have had them in court, no two ways about it. So the fact that they have proposed that I do these, and the proposal to me was if I don't pass, then they would consider my successful completion of the OCVA, and I asked them to do it in parallel, which they did. I do know they did do this because one of the requirements I said to them was, you need to ring my OCVA assessor. And I know for a fact he'd been trying to get in touch with the Deputy PMO flight operations for quite some time and made multiple attempts. And like all of us, was stonewalled. He eventually did get through to him. So I do know that, true to their word, they did try to do it in parallel, but their outcome was that their outcome that they wanted was that I passed and went away. And I did pass, so I'm grateful that I sat that. Now, what Arthur mentioned is very true as well. Those people that are looking to start a career that don't meet the requirements to do the ACVA, but I'll give you another example. He's a 300, 400-hour pilot, CPL qualified, IRX rated, multi-engine instrument command, everything, even to the point he's ATPL theory licensed as well. He failed a different version of the Ishihara from a different DAMI. He passed one in a different city and a different, and forgive me if my medical information is wrong here, Arthur, but there are different copies of the pseudochromatic plates, and a copy he was given by a different DAMI was either not up to standard or different, and they failed him on it. So he then went down the path of doing the Farnsworth-Lanton test, the CAD test, and again, while I don't know the exact details of his results on those, CASA AvMed deemed him severely colour vision deficient. Now, he came to me, conveniently was in the same town, and said, what do I do? You've sat the OCVA and I know you're in limbo with it. Where do I proceed? Where do I proceed to? We have regular conversations about this, where we're at with it, how things are progressing, what we know, what we don't know. His information has since been given to Senator Fawcett, who has touched base as well. But there's your other end of the argument, Arthur, is you've got a 300-400-hour pilot who's been flying under night IFR conditions for 2 years and without issue, without incident, but sits a different version of the pseudochromatic plates and fails them for whatever reason, I don't know. And now he's in the same situation as what Michael and myself landed ourselves in. And he's been, again, more hours than me, more qualified than me, probably a better pilot than me. But that's the next argument there is someone who has spent those hundreds of thousands of dollars, someone who has met the criteria to a particular DAMI, but then hasn't met it to someone else. Where does that candidate go? You're on mute, Arthur.
That's Michael's fault.
It was my fault.
He probably can't go very far at all at the moment, except to get behind the push that we're promoting. There are some very sharp minds. It's a shame John O'Brien's not here tonight with us, but he's probably in Alaska or Miami or somewhere boring like that. But
the height of him.
Clinton here.
The height of him, how dare he?
Yes. Clinton is a very sharp shooter when it comes to examining the regulations, and he is very, very strong on all of this. Should be easy to sort out because there is a thing called the law, and what we need to do first and foremost is to get CASA to obey the law, and they haven't been. They've been at the whim of the zealots, as we like to call them, because they are. At the whim of these zealots, they introduce tests that are not compatible with the way the law is written. The CAD test is not an operational test, and yet CASA, the PMO, and the Deputy PMO insist that it is. Well, it's just ludicrous as a proposition. Now, your friend in WA with 300 hours.
He's Sydney-based. Sorry,
Sydney-based.
My apologies. Yeah, he's Sydney-based.
Right. Has he done the CAD?
Done the CAD. Done the Farnsworth. And I believe, I haven't heard the exact figures of how he went with those. Probably because I did a mail thing and didn't really pay attention when he told me. But I do recall when he said that, when I gave him my figures, which I'll make it public knowledge, I don't care. My CAD result was 0.2 on the blue-white and high sevens on the red-green, which was 1 point something percent, or 1 point something measuring markers outside what they deemed safe. Now, I had a deputy PMO say that I'm severely colour vision deficient. However, I had another AvMed officer and an executive of CASA say, no, you're only minor. So Luke, this particular candidate, Luke's his name, he said to me, well, mine are very similar to that, and they've said the same thing to me. So,
well, it's tempting to get bogged down in CAD results, but I think
it
they're
is, yeah.
totally irrelevant. They have no bearing at all on safety. It's a clinical test of colour vision, and that's it. And it's very reliable in determining the degree of the loss of accurate colour vision. But it's not in any way connected to the question of safe or unsafe. Neither is the Ishihara, and neither is the Farnsworth lantern, and neither is going for a drive down a busy street at night. None of those have any bearing on the question of safety. You know, you don't get your license by your driving license by doing all sorts of fancy and expensive tests to see if you can identify the colours of the traffic signals. They take you for a drive and you show them without even thinking about it, that when that light's the top one, which happens to be the red one, and when you're close enough, it looks very red, you stop, full stop, that's it. You need to demonstrate safe performance driving the car to get that license. And on the issue of flying an aeroplane in any type of sense, whether it's IFR, VFR, night, day, it doesn't matter. You need to demonstrate to somebody qualified to assess you that you can safely perform the duties required. And CADs and Ishiharas and Farnsworth lanterns, they're all totally irrelevant. Now, had the OCVA not been tampered with in the way that it has in the last 2 years, it would have been my hope that after, say, another 5 or 10 years of joint use of the OCVA, both in New Zealand and Australia and whatever other country we might be able to convince they should adopt it, it would have become quite apparent that it too was irrelevant, that anyone, you know, look, by all means, test people for their colour vision, but don't attach a label to them in terms of safe or unsafe. It's
interesting thing.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about your Farnsworth lantern test is rewind to when I was a 16-year-old. I passed a RAF Farnsworth lantern test because they maintained it. Fast forward to what I am now, or 2 years ago, when I did the Farnsworth lantern test to an optometrist clinic that shall remain nameless, where the machine failed 8 times and was not maintained, and the conditions were completely different to what I did the Air Force one in. So it's very interesting that the Air Force had maintained equipment. The clinic that they told me to go to, they had maintained equipment, and, you know, the conditions were suitable for me to set that assessment. But you go to an optometrist clinic where they go, we have this here and you can use it if you want to, but they don't make any money out of it. So why would they invest it into that technology?
Gents, we have had a couple of questions come through, so I might just ask them of the panel, and then Clinton, I think one niches very nicely into talking about the legislation and the tiers of testing. So one come in. For someone based in WA where the CAD is not available, how does one avoid a trip to New South Wales or Victoria to donate their funds?
You can't.
I think the answer to that is you can't, unfortunately.
You do what I did, and you get on a plane and you go down to Sydney, you do the CAD test, and you get told by a optometrist or ophthalmologist that you'll never fly a plane, and thanks for giving me $600, and I hope you enjoy your stay in Sydney.
Yeah. So that's the answer to that one, unfortunately, which again is part of the problem with, again, we all agree one of the problems with the CAD is there are only 2 in Australia. So other than the fact it's a diagnostic test and doesn't replicate an operational situation, there are only a couple of them around. Those operators have paid, I think it's about 9,000 quid, £10,000 sterling to get the equipment, plus training, plus cost, plus. They want to make their pound of flesh out of their investment. So That's the unfortunate situation there.
Sad reality of that, Michael, as a businessman, I would probably be doing the same thing if that's what I was allowed to do. So I can completely understand why they do it.
Yeah, well,
which is the saddest part about it.
But that's called having a vested interest, isn't it? That would very much cloud your judgment of the relevance of your testing technique to the fundamental question of safety. So
I would assume so.
You know, the owners of the CAD you'd never hear them say that, oh no, this has nothing to do with safety. We just want to see how colourblind you are. You know, that's all we're doing it. And for the purpose of making $600 or $700 and then a bit more to write the report to CASA. But these people in their white coats and their bow ties, they truly believe that they are saving the population, the general broad population in Australia, from disasters. If people that fail the CAD were allowed to fly, well, you know, all hell would break loose. And we know that I mean, the CAD's a fairly new test. The Sky never touched on it before. The CAD is a good money spinner, and it's got, you know, these people like to talk in jargon. They will blind you with science. They will, you know, somebody says, oh, gee, I didn't even know what that word meant. What's that mean? You're a deuteranope. Oh, and the CIE chromaticity diagram, what the hell's that about? You know, and these people love to talk high tech, and with it, they try to convey a high level of expertise in the question of occupational relevance, and they have no idea. No idea. So your friend that went to QUT, I think you didn't say, Simon, but QUT is the only place, I think, in Queensland.
He did it. He did it in. I did my Farnsworth in QUT back when I was 16. That's where I did that. Yeah. But he did his CAD results with Melbourne University. So.
Right. Well, we know that
I can't think of. Yeah, you guys do. I've not had anything to do with him, but yeah, he went to Melbourne to do his.
Yeah. So, well, there's a lot we could say about that in that particular facility too, but we're not going to get bogged down in that because there are more important issues.
Yes.
To talk about tonight.
Now that you have mentioned the phrase, you mentioned they're talking in jargon, and so Clinton, I'm going to set you a challenge here, not to use too much legal jargon as we go through.
I might have got a text message asking how big your words are going to be as well.
Well, I'm just.
We have the question here. I think I'll leave this as the lead-in. Is, are CASA likely to recall all candidates that have completed the OCVA and passed to do the ACVA in the future? So I guess that is, if you've been deemed to meet the standard, we can talk about what that means. Previously, what protection do you have or not have in that regard?
Are you asking me that question?
It was a question without notice. So
yeah, no, that's all right. And let me apologise up front for my tech. So it failed me right at the last minute. So if it does again, just blank me. No. Well, we need to emphasise the fact that the standards in the regulations haven't changed. The SARPs haven't changed. The objective risks or otherwise of having colour vision deficiency haven't changed. All that's changed is personalities and personal opinions within CASA. That's all that's changed. And unfortunately, that weight of opinions has taken over and effectively implemented the policy that they have disappeared, but that's what we have at the moment. In terms of protection, the biggest ace they've got up their sleeves is, of course, that individuals haven't got the money and can't afford the stress and money to take them on. And that's the ace they have up their sleeves. And in fact, I understand Simon someone from AvMed said to you that you could take them to the AAT, but you'd be unsuccessful because you haven't got the funds to afford a battle with the CASA legal team.
His exact words to me were, Clinton, and you're close, was your options here, Simon, are you take this as it stands and wait until we've come up with this review, or you take us to the AAT, which you may not be able to afford given we've got the backing of CASA's legal team behind us.
Yeah. And that's so the protection, a lawyer will tell you, the protection in theory is to take them on in litigation, but that is practically for many people an impractical path. And I'll talk about the endpoint that we're at now, but I suspect I'll ask Simon a question without notice. If Senator Fawcett hadn't got involved and this hadn't been exposed to the light of day and CVDPA started agitating for you, do you think they would have backed down? I doubt they would have backed down. They would have just rolled over you.
It would have been the same arrogant story. Oh, well, we're 3 weeks away. We're 3 weeks away. You just need to be patient. Yes, we accept you've been going through this for 2 years, but that's not our fault. That's yours for doing the OCVA at the wrong time. And they've even admitted, had you have done this a week earlier, you may not have had an issue. Had you have done it a day earlier, you probably wouldn't have had an issue. I said, so then where's the integrity in this threshold, guys? And Pip Spence and Kate Manderson hit the nail on the head. No one's been refused a medical or denied any form of unrestricted medical during these transitional periods. No, to our best knowledge, that hasn't occurred. And give them the benefit of the doubt. If that information wasn't being passed up, then they was hung out to dry as what they should have been for making that statement. And to CASA's credit, and there are very few people in CASA who have now since been able to help me with this, they've addressed that as well. So it's, it would have been, I guarantee if I had this conversation with you now after not having Senator Fawcett and you guys step in and I was on this webinar, you would have said to me, oh, Simon, so when are you doing the ACVA? I would have said 3 weeks' time.
Yeah. So I'll quickly do a brief on the regulatory structure, and it's actually not that complicated. In the Civil Aviation Safety Regulations, there in Part 67, there are medical standards, and those medical standards have criteria. And the last one in the Class 1 medical standard is criterion 1.39. There's no magic in the number. And that criterion is, can readily distinguish the colours that need to be distinguished for the safe exercise of privileges or performance of duties under the relevant licence. And there's a note for how to demonstrate this. See Sub-Regulation 67-150, Sub-Regulation 6. Now I'm going to scroll up to that. And this is where you might have heard of the 3 tiers of test. And it's built by that regulation. Here's 156 of the methodology, the prescribed law as to how to demonstrate compliance with the colour perception criteria. And it says, A, so this is what we call the first tier test. In daylight, artificial light, blah, 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 Ishihara. That's commonly known as the Ishihara test. For those who've done it and succeeded, it's the one with the numbers in the dots and the squiggly lines and all of those sorts of things. Now, if you pass that test, then you've satisfied the criterion. If you don't, then you go to the second tier test, and I won't read that out, but that's what's commonly called the Farnsworth Lantern test. And none of this is controversial, and none of this has changed in years. None of these criteria, none of these words, nothing in the ICAO SARPs, the medical SARPs. But the third tier test is the one that's controversial. So if you don't get a tick in A or B, then you go to C, the third tier test. For somebody who does not satisfy paragraph A or B, correctly identifying all relevant coloured lights in a test determined by CASA that simulates an operational situation. simulates an operational situation. And this is the one that the controversy is all about. Because what happened years ago is that someone came along and represented that the CAD is the third tier test, even though it does not simulate any operational situation. And it's the heart of the controversy. And let me say as an aside, I did an FOI request for the document evidencing the determination by an appropriate delegate of the CAD as simulating an operational situation, and the FOI officer came back and said, there is no document matching that description. And I'm paraphrasing here. I went down the line area and said, who's determined this test? And they all shrugged. So that's what we did. This is the corporate competence and integrity of the organisation with which we're dealing. Not only will they represent a test that is not operational as an operational test, they can't even prove that someone with the power has purported to determine it. Now, that caused all sorts of furor because effectively it's a diagnostic test. It's a lovely, it should be a tier 1 test, but it's not an operational test, and it's now used to label and cull people. Now, what happened a few years ago is that the Kiwis introduced the OCVA, an Operational Colour Vision Assessment, which actually simulates operational situations. And in a period of enlightenment, CASA adopted that as one of the third tier tests. And naturally, everyone went and did the OCVA because it's a useful test rather than the CAD test, which is an expensive journey in circles for someone who's already failed the first and second tier tests. And at that point, the CVDPA put its feet up and thought, wow, finally, we've got this going. And as Arthur said, eventually the penny would drop and say, all these assessments are going on all day, every day anyway, with flight examiners and all of the people doing periodic checks and everything. They check to see whether someone's competent. Anyway, what has happened is that there's a change of persons and personal opinions within CASA, and suddenly, without notice, the OCVA was discarded as a third tier test, and the representation that was made that they were going to strengthen the OCVA, and that's not what they've done. They've discarded it. In their religion, the O word is anathema. The O word, operational. It's not an operational test. It's got to be a clinical medical test. They just don't want to do it. And on repeated questioning about whether the ACVA was going to replace the OCVA as a third tier test, we keep getting told that no decision has yet been made. Well, the truth is, no decision is a decision. That is, if they don't determine it as a third tier test, then it has no existence in that regulation prescribing the way in which compliance is to be demonstrated. And the policy that was published on their website, on CASA's website, which has now been disappeared, has actually been implemented. That is, all the victims have got to go through the CAD, down to the CAD first. And after CASA's already made the decision that the person does not meet the, what are the words that they use? Clinical medical standard, having made that decision and label them, then they say you can go off and do this Mickey Mouse ACVA to prove I don't know what, because that is precisely the hierarchy that was described in the policy that's been taken off the website, but that's what's happening in fact. and the form that the examiner has to fill out to report the medical flight test to AvMed says on it, the examiner has to have a letter from AvMed saying that the person has already failed the 3 tests, the 3 tiers of tests, before the ACVA before CASA AvMed will listen to anybody telling them results of the ACVA. And so we have some good news in individual cases. We have good news in individual cases like Simon and I think Michael, but the modus operandi of AvMed, these people, is to deal with the few individual troublemakers, but the long game they've already won, in the sense that anyone new coming into the system is going to be put through this process. And AvMed at the moment have no interest in doing any more work on the OCVA because they've achieved their end game. And this will be a telling question. I'll ask you, Simon, first, and then you, Michael, in turn. Are you confident that the medical standards and the testing of colour vision is now settled, and you can be confident as the way it's going to be treated in the future? Simon, you'll have to go and unmute yourself, mate.
I've never done that in a meeting. It's the first time for everything. I'm going to reference a question from Rich Smith here, and I'll answer it in the same way that I'll try and answer his question or his statement with the same answer, where he has stated that he's done the OCVA and currently has 0 restrictions on his license. Brilliant. That's what should be happening. However, the anxiety he gets when he goes for his class 1 every year is crippling. I did my renewal on Friday, and my anxiety, and I said to him, he said to me, "Why is your pulse rate high?" And I've gone, "Well, have a read of all the documentation I sent to you." And he goes, "What's your resting pulse rate normally like?" And I said, "It's normally about 20 beats per minute, less than that." And he goes, "So I said, there's a level of anxiety with my class 1 medical that I didn't get through uni. I didn't get through a check flight. I didn't even get when I first took off, landed a plane on my own, which would, for most people, would be a stressful situation." And the anxiety and stress that comes with my yearly medical to go, what are they going to do, it's mind-boggling. And you get home from your medical, and the first question you get asked is, "How did you go?" And you go, "Good, I think." "Oh, how did it all go for you?" "Yeah, I did everything they asked really well." I said, "What does that mean for you now?" I don't know. So the result for me this time was they issued my medical without the night restriction, without the ATPL restriction. There was a question in here as well about passengers. Clinton, please forgive me for killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. Stuart Private Medical also asked the same question. No, that doesn't have any impact on your ability to carry passengers. So those restrictions are totally gone. But what do they do when I go for my medical in 12 months' time? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess my turn now, and I guess my best way to answer this one's actually with a story from 2017. So I have, people aren't familiar with my situation. I held a class 1 and class 2 medical in 2009, then maintained it at class 2 all the way through until February this year, when I went to go back to class 1 and got sent through the rigmarole of, well, now we need to put new restrictions on. Back in so we talked about it to anxiety. My blood pressure is always up when I go in for my medical, and the reason is in 2017 I did an FOI request on my medical history, and for any of you who have conditions with AvMed and are interested, it's something I probably recommend doing, because you get access to everything, the internal case notes, the whole lot of your record. And I was surprised, and I'm just going to read off it here so I don't get this wrong. But in 2017, await blood work. If no, issue clean. Also, revise existing condition 13, which is the ICAO Chapter 6 Annex 1 condition. Revise it to 20, limited to flights by day visual flight rules only. Letter drafted. A few hours later, hasn't this application been drafted? grandfathered, i.e. you can't put new restrictions on an existing medical. Thank you, I'll name redact, you're right. Please amend my previous journal entry to show await blood work, if clean, issue as is. So that's how I found out in 2017 how close I came at a renewal to ending up with a day VFR restriction that only got picked up by a very cluey administrator in the AvMed team, not one of the doctors. And ever since then, every time I've gone in for a medical, my hands are like that, because that is how close I've come in the past to getting additional restrictions just chucked on there. And I can guarantee that if they'd put that restriction on, it wouldn't have been a simple phone call to say, oh, I think you've made a mistake. It would have been, tough luck, we'll see you at the AAT. So yeah, it's a little bit tense.
I'll follow something Michael said there, noting that his conditions awaiting blood. I know of another 6,000 hour commercial pilot who's recently undergone a health matter where a DAMI cleared him fit to fly. An AvMed officer, and I won't mention the name of the medical practitioner at AvMed, has said, you know what, he isn't, because I don't like this particular medication they put him on to prevent infection or to prevent something. No, I don't like that. So we're grounding him immediately. And that particular candidate happened to be pilot in command when that came through. So it isn't just CVD pilots going through this. This is, in fact, a common problem for everyone with a Class 1 medical. And I would bet apples to oranges that if you were to ask 100 ATPL pilots, how's your stress levels when you go for your Class 1, noting that their livelihood hinges on that, they'd give you a similar answer to what Michael and I just did.
Yeah, and this is among the many reasons why I've said publicly on numerous occasions, my view is that on balance, CASA AvMed is now a force inimical to aviation safety, because problems are being driven underground. People are saying, I'm not going to tell, I'll delete the expletives, I'm not going to tell these people anything because of their overreaction. And I don't mind that if the person then goes and gets proper treatment or whatever for the thing. But some people are too scared even to go to another doctor on the quiet for fear that will get back to AvMed, and then they've got to lie on medical applications, and that's a criminal offence. And I've said in submissions to CASA about medical review, like I haven't got CVD, and I'm just a day VFR pilot, private. I don't do it for a living. My medical each couple of years is the single most stressful transaction I engage in, precisely for the reason that you guys said. What is going to come out of left field from some zealot who thinks he or she knows better than everybody else? And you know, these restrictions, I've told the story many times, and we'll fight them this time around. When they AvMed put a restriction on my certificate, and I squinted at it, and I thought, I said to them, what am I not allowed to do, or what must I do to comply with this restriction? And they said, oh, nothing. And I said, well, get it off my certificate. And I made an application to the AAT.
Does that answer your question there, Stuart? Sorry to interrupt you, Clinton, but I think
right.
You just answered, Stuart. I think you just answered, sorry, I'm not sure of your name, but I'm referring to you as Stuart. I think you might have just hit the nail on the head on his question there. What does that restriction actually mean?
Well, as I said, if it doesn't actually restrict you in the exercise of the privileges of your license, and the test of that is to ask them, what law can I break through breaching this restriction? And the answer in my case was none. I said, get it off there. Dissembling sophistry. So I made an application to the AAT, and they took it off. They took it off. But did they do that for everyone else? No. The next issue of my certificate, they did it to me again. And I wrote to them again, get rid of this bullshit off my certificate, which they did just for me. When I did a presentation for AOPA back in 2018, 19, I think it was, people were texting in saying, I've got that restriction on my certificate. So what these public officials do is whatever they like. They make whatever decisions they want. They treat the medical certification system as their private little canvas on which they get to express their opinions, despite the law. And they do that because they know 99 times out of 100, they get away with it. And with colour vision deficiency, as folks like you slowly just get so frustrated with the stress and the uncertainty dropping off, people coming into the system being culled, they've achieved their outcome. They've achieved world domination from Australia through their leadership. And of course, what is actually really going to happen is people will go to New Zealand or the United States where they're enlightened and get their qualifications there and contribute to the exodus of people escaping CASA. And it's so wrong, but they get away with it because they can. The cost of taking them on, which is why I say to everybody, in this particular situation, the stabbing at the heart of Saron or Smaug, the weak point is the CAD. We've got to go to the federal court and get the CAD declared, that no reasonable person could declare the CAD as simulating an operational situation, so that they have to actually determine and get someone sensible to determine an OCVA style test again. And I say to everyone out there that might be all right, Jack, at the moment, they mightn't have colour vision deficiency. So what? Your turn will come. And when your turn comes and you're trying to deal with this nonsense out of them, going, hang on a sec, all my doctors say I'm okay, this doesn't make sense, this person is overreacting. And when you're faced with that prospect of having to fight them on your own, you'll understand why I'm now saying now is the time to please contribute to the CVDPA, because we figure that we're going to have to gear up to fight the CAD, head it off in its face, head on in the federal court to get it done once and for all. And I know neither I nor Arthur nor anyone involved with the CVDPA makes any money out of those contributions. It's a fund that we didn't think we'd have to gather up again to fight this fight, but Arthur's been through it. And then John O'Brien had to go through it once under the last crusade. We thought we'd crushed that crusade, and lo and behold, some more of the zealots have popped up and have recommenced their crusade. And the only way to stop them is to fight them. Complain, talk to your members of parliament, write to whoever, write to them and say, this is not good enough, take them on. I'll get off my soapbox there and give Arthur a chance.
No, I'm putting you back on your soapbox, Clinton, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong, but at John's last struggle with the AAT, did the creator of the CAD, and I know I'm not doing anything unlawful here because it's public knowledge, did he not go on the stand under expert witness and public examination and say that the CAD was not designed for an operational aviation assessment?
Yes, words to that effect. Arthur is nodding there. There was he said it doesn't simulate an operational situation, and my grandmother could spot that. You know, all you got to do is play the video of it. Anyone with any background in aviation knows that. But get this, and Michael's seen this. Michael's seen the exquisite language that they use in correspondence, where they say to you, the AAT has recognised the CAD test. Now, I'm just going to give you a little legal brief. The determination of the CAD test is not reviewable by the AAT. That has the AAT hasn't got jurisdiction to knock the CAD over. It's got to suck it up and say they're reviewing the reviewable decisions, which is the refusal to issue the certificate or the imposition of conditions or whatever. But they represent to people that they use exquisitely ambiguous language to suggest to people the AAT has said the CAD is a recognised third-tier test. The only people who recognise it as a third-tier test are the zealots and the people who make money off it, and that's the fact.
You threw my name in there, Clinton, so I will say yes, that did appear in one of the legal letters I got from CASA, the letters I got from the CASA legal and regulatory team. Those exact words. And the letter before that, an incorrect reference to the CASRs, which related to if the standard has changed, which it hasn't in 20 plus years. So, like, well, the standard has changed. Therefore, we can do what we want. Here's the reference. So it's same sophistry.
I've yet to see correspondence from AvMed, or on behalf of AvMed, in the last 5 years, at least, that doesn't have patent errors in it. I'm not talking about some, esoteric legal concept. Just simply citing a regulation in their correspondence that doesn't do what they say it does. Under this regulation, we're going to do X. And I say, have you read that regulation? And then you go back and you push back, and then that falls off the table. They just do whatever they like, hoping that 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100 will go, oh, well, they must know what they're doing. They're the regulator, and they're the, and so much of it is mistake-ridden, but they don't care because they know how much stress and cost it takes to fight back.
Can I say something? Because I think it's getting close to end time. But I just wanted to reiterate what I started to say earlier to anyone watching, anyone interested in all of this, that Clinton is an absolute goldmine when it comes to experience with federal government regulations, especially as it relates to aviation and to marine safety. And Clinton, unlike the other three people on the screen, does not have a colour vision defect, but he's a strong believer in a fair an application of just laws. So with that, we had a little powwow. John O'Brien and myself were already directors of the CVDPA, and we invited Clinton to become a director as well, so that he didn't, that it recognised his importance to the organisation. So we're very lucky to have you, Clinton, and thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. You're a legend in this area, Arthur, and John O'Brien's flying jumbo jets around day, night, IFR, VFR, or whatever with a colour deficiency, but he's a legend also because he fought the fight at the coalface. I've said for many, many years, all I ask CASA to do is comply with the law. If they just comply with the law, then a lot of the controversy that erupts wouldn't happen. But they just say, well, go off to the federal court and prove that prove that they're wrong. So anyway, we'll just have to keep fighting the fight.
The one thing I would like to add, and this will probably, by the time somebody gets to the end of this, they've probably either tuned out or they've gone, okay, I've heard what I need to. But the thing that these people out there need to know who are in the same situation as Michael and myself, or who are in a similar situation with another medical issue, you're not alone. And I guarantee you somebody's been there before you. And if you invest the time, and I will stipulate that it takes time and it will take a considerable amount of energy and effort for you to do it, but find those people, talk to them, and find a way forward, because you will get the help you need. You just have to be prepared to look. The old thing, good things come to those who wait. Rubbish. Good things come to those who go out and get it. So if you've got something that you do need help with, contact one of us, even if it's not colour vision related, because we can potentially, given the contacts we've made, given the people that we've had to go hunting with, we can probably point you in the right direction, or at least get you started. So please don't hesitate to ask for help, because we're here. Tell me I wasn't on mute when I said that.
No, here. I was going to say here. I agree. Well, we can point people in the right direction. Over to you, Michael, to wrap it up.
Well, happy to wrap it up. So I think I can't really add anything more to what Simon just said there at the end. So I've had a few questions come through around how to get in contact with CVDPA, contact details on the website, Facebook page, really wanting to make it active. There's been some comments earlier around how do we increase the attention on this? How do we get more political involved? We need to continue the conversation, and we all need to be continuing the conversation. I know with my challenge over the most of this year, every single person I explained my situation to who was in aviation said, this is wrong, this is ridiculous, I would fly with you any day of the week. I don't understand why they're doing this to you. And hearing that helped, but it also shows that there is a lot of appetite out there and a lot of support out there. So we just really need to make sure we are telling these stories, we are getting out there, and we continue the conversation and build the conversation online and within your networks.
I have, on what Michael just said, I've got a irrational hatred of social media, but it serves its purpose. And if you need to, find me on that or talk to the CVDPA through their Facebook page or through email, because they will be able to give you my contact details if you want to talk to me. Or if there's something I've missed for you, just let me know, and I'll happily. And I'm one of the guys actually here on this chat tonight. I had a chat with him on my way home from work. Found my name through the link, and he was really curious. And it was aside from the fact that my phone had a meltdown and I lost him midway through the call. It was a good discussion, and if that's all it is to begin with, is facilitating that discussion, to know, okay, I'm not alone, and other people are in the same situation, then that's point number one to go. I'm not as small a fish in this great big pond as I thought.
So I might wrap it there. Here. So I might wrap it there. Thanks everyone for they've had off their time tonight. We'll keep it going, and we'll continue to do more. I think the plan is to continue to do more of these, in particular, just as we learn more about what's happening, we'll find out more. So we'll let everyone know. And as FOI requests come in, we'll expose that and let people know.
Safe flying, everyone.
See you guys. Thank you.